Okay, well this is OSP 224, Office 365 Management and Deployment. So my name is Alistair Spears. I'm a program manager in the Microsoft Office division. I work on Office 365, Exchange, and Office. You can probably tell by my accent, I'm an Australian. I'm living in Seattle, now in Europe, so I'm very time zone confused, if you like. But I'm glad to see you all here at 5 p.m. on a sunny Amsterdam day to talk about Office 365 deployment, a topic very close to my heart. So today, we'll just recap about what Office 365 is, and then I'll take you through some of the deployment, migration tools, and technologies we use to help customers get to Office 365 either as a cutover approach or as a hybrid approach with many of the different tools as well. Something that I think is also very important is that you understand the process that you want to go through as you move to Office 365. All the technology and the tools in the world are great, but if you don't understand the process of how a migration like this should happen, you can get yourself into quite a lot of trouble. And I also want to talk about the run state, what you can expect to manage Office 365 when you get to Office 365, when you get to the cloud, how your management experience might change and how you will manage these technologies. It's great for us. Office 365 has been a huge success for us. And it's a year old today. This is our first anniversary of having Office 365 in the market. We turned a grand old age of 1. If you look at perhaps our older products, Office itself is about 21. Word is about 31. Excel is about 25. So we like to think that we can really develop software that really stands the test of time, that has a very long lifespan to it. And just by a show of hands, who in this room is using Office or has a customer using Office? A few hands. Who's using Exchange? Yeah, so it's great to see we've got a lot of valued customers, and as we make this next transition to Office 365, we want to make sure that through this process, we don't turn good on-premises customers into bad cloud customers. We want to make sure that that experience is very good for you as possible. We know that, we like to think that this cloud technology has a huge opportunity to solve a whole lot of problems that we have in IT. But at the same time, we know that this doesn't happen overnight, and that you may not be ready for the cloud yet. In many places, the cloud may not be ready for you yet. And at Office, we like to take a very long-winded approach. We don't mind taking 20 years or 50 years to get this model right, but we just want to make sure that when you decide that Office 365 is right for you, you can make that change, and we have all the tools in place as well. So actually, a lot of what my job is convincing people not to move to Office 365 because of any number of different reasons. But hopefully I'll paint you a lighter picture today about all the things to consider and why you would want to go to Office 365 as well. This is a 200-level session. So in a 200-level session, we won't go too deep into the particular workload. So if you're expecting detailed information about how to move Exchange or how to move SharePoint or how to move Link, we won't be going into that detail today. But instead, I'd like to give you essentially an architect's view of the entire suite and all the things that you should consider around the workloads as well. And just a quick show of hands. Anyone using Office 365 today in any capacity? Wow, so all these people are here to keep me honest and see if it's been fixed since they went through the process as well. Great. So for those that aren't aware, Office 365 is the new name for our online services from the Microsoft Office division. We like to think that it is the Office experience the way we intended it, and the way we intended it to all work together with SharePoint, with Exchange, with Link, with Office Client, and with all the other Office web apps and all the other components that we make in the Office division. And we can deliver it to you from our own services as well. What you may not know is that Office 365 is run by the same people that actually build the products itself. The Office team runs the Office Professional Plus components of Office 365. The Exchange team runs Exchange Online. The SharePoint team runs SharePoint Online. And it's a very interesting experience as we make this move from being a on-premises software company to being an on-premises software company as well as a cloud solutions company as well. Because there are a lot of things that you do differently as a service provider than you do as a software developer. Show of hands, has anyone raised a hotfix before? No one? A couple of people? Okay, well, a hotfix can take a couple of weeks for us to verify, retest, and make sure that there are no issues and it doesn't cause any regressions, for instance. And a regression is a term that we use when we introduce new bugs by trying to fix an old bug. And I'm sure if any of you have developers at your workplace, you know that developers are fond of introducing new bugs while fixing old bugs. And so we don't want to include these regressions. So we have a number of different test passes to go through. And sometimes it can take us weeks to have a hotfix ready to a certain quality level before we can deliver you that hotfix. In Office 365, we have a service level agreement of 99.9%. If we're down any more than 43 minutes a month, we pay you money. We don't like to pay you money. We don't like our service to be down. And so it's a huge change now that our SharePoint developers, our Exchange developers, our Link developers, our Office developers can be woken up in the middle of the night. They're on duty 24/7. You have one of the Exchange engineering team or the SharePoint engineering team on call to fix these issues because we have to change the entire approach we have to maintaining that quality process as well. And we fix it once, and we fix it for all the Office 365 customers. So it is a very different approach, and we're learning a lot as we're going on this Office 365 journey. And for the customers that are already on Office 365, you'll have already seen that continuous improvement in the new features that we release almost on a monthly cadence now as we develop new features and allow and light up new capabilities on the service itself. Nice echo in here. So for what is Office 365? It's Office, it's Link, it's Exchange, it's SharePoint. In Exchange Online, we have 25 gigabyte mailboxes. It's a phenomenal amount. In fact, if you're on some of the higher level Exchange Online plans, you can have effectively unlimited archiving in Exchange Online. It's the sort of economy of scale that we can get running in our data centers. And if you've seen our diorama down by the booth, you know, it's quite an impressive feat to build these billion-dollar data centers with hundreds of thousands of servers around the world to make sure that we have this economy of scale and that we can provide you this service wherever you are. It includes SharePoint Online, it includes Link Online, and it includes Office Client as well as the Office web apps. Now, many people ask me, is that Office through a remote desktop session or anything like that? No, it's still installed on the desktop. We still believe that that client experience makes the most sense when it's on the computing devices that are closest to the user. You really want that interactive experience. And so when we think about cloud, we don't just think about web. Web's fantastic, but we can also use the cloud to give you much richer client experiences as well. And so we've been doing this for quite some time with Office. In 1995, clip art used to come from what used to be called the server, and we're now calling the cloud. But anyway, clip art was around for quite some time. Windows Update services and a lot of these capabilities are really running out of these data centers. And as we move to Office 365, we're taking more of that capability to essentially take your client activation to Office 365 as well. So you don't have to run that KMS server on premises either. But for many of our customers, and what we hear quite a lot, is what I like to call forklift IT. And many of you may be in forklift IT. You know, anyone's boss use phrases like, we need to sweat the assets more? See a couple of nods. Every single project, it seemed like, has to go to the board for approval or the budget committee or some sort of steering group. Almost like IT isn't empowered with our own budget. We have to go and beg a budget from someone else to make any changes. And when we finally do get those projects, we're so busy with doing just the maintenance tasks that oftentimes the projects will get sent to outside contractors or consultants. Anyone see those problems quite a lot as well? It's kind of a weird mode to be in. We see many of our customers like that. And essentially, if you like to think of it from an economics point of view, and if you could simplify your IT budget in maintaining the status quo and the amount of money you had for innovation, you may have a little bit of innovation, and you may have a lot of maintenance work to do, and you'll have these spikes of maintenance work to do. You need to get off Windows Server 2000. You need to get off Windows XP. You need to upgrade the antivirus. you need to add more storage into the Exchange server. And there's these big, chunky, blocky purchases that are so big and so expensive, the business never really gets the appetite to do it until every 3 years, 5 years. Anyone still in Office 2000? Any 12-year veterans of a client operating system there? So anyway, this approach is very hard to do. It's hard to manage. And I guess the challenge is the board approval is so low that you just have to go to the board for approval to make these big changes, or the CIO or the CFO to make these sorts of changes. And it's expensive. So I suppose if I was going to give you survival tips, that if you are in this mode and you want to stay in this mode, I like to think that change only happens by divine mandate. The CFO gets fired, and a new CFO comes in and wants to make a change, and all of a sudden you have that budget finally to spend those projects that you could never get approved before. Or you need to, we call it tin cupping. You take it around to the business units, the sales team. It's like, hey, would you like some fancy new tablets? Well, we need some money to pay for it. So can you go and ask the CFO, because he doesn't believe us that these things are important. And if you want the interesting projects, you're probably going to be a consultant or a partner so that you can jump around from whenever these divine mandates happen. And again, it's not the sort of IT that I like. It's not the sort of IT that I want to work in. And that's why Office 365 for me is such an exciting idea. Because it's a depressing and ridiculous idea to get stuck in that model of having to just maintain as long as you can and sweat the asset as long as you can, and then get thrown into a massive upgrade cycle. And in many cases, if you did the last desktop upgrade, you may not be around for the next desktop upgrade. And so all of that knowledge that the organization, the IT team builds up is gone, and you have to almost start from scratch again. Was it the finance team, or was it the accounts payable team that had all the challenges with macros last time? We don't know, so we have to make those mistakes and relearn from those mistakes every time. And it's very hard to do. So I like to think that in this sort of model, we can go back to first principles. And this is Heraclitus, if anyone's a student of ancient history. And actually, this is a painting that's just down the street in Utrecht. I'm sure that's close. I'm in Australia. Everything's close in Australia, or in Europe compared to Australia. But there's a painting in the Museum of Utrecht there. And he was quite famous for coining the term logos, which became the logi in technology or in archaeology or in any of that study. And it means knowledge, the word, the order of things and those sorts of things. But he also coined a pretty interesting phrase all that long ago: change is the only constant. And I think in IT, we have to remember that sometimes, and that we do try and lock these environments down. We do try and sweat the asset as long as possible. But the world moves around us, the business environment changes, and we do need to be flexible as well. So taking into account change as being the only constant, how do we take that change and operationalize that change rather than doing these big spiky approaches? I guess this is my bad economics as well. But if you can start to break that model of rather doing these expensive forklift upgrades every few years and going to the board with those expensive propositions, you can start to move to a mode where perhaps your operating costs are a little bit higher because you are constantly changing. You're making changes every week, every month, every day. But what it means is that you still keep that tacit knowledge in-house. You become experts at change management. And as experts in change management, you can change much quicker when the business demands it as well. And of course, this frees up a lot of that time that you're spending trying to position those major upgrade processes to the business. You can instead pitch more innovative solutions and actually adapt to the changing conditions around you. And so instead of stopping CapEx spikes, it's really about slightly increasing OpEx and not having those big spikes anymore. It's a model of smaller, more regular changes rather than these big, once every 3-year upgrades. And we're just as guilty of this as the CFO at Microsoft, of making these big, chunky upgrades. And in the past, that was the way that we had to do it, because we had to print it on floppy disks and get it into the store shelves so everyone could buy it, those sorts of things. But in the cloud model, we can deliver this software to you so much faster. We can start to free up the resources spent on doing tasks that perhaps the business didn't want to pay for before. I mean, how many of your sales teams pay for an IT guy to change out hard drives, or would like to pay for that? It's such a common task that we all do, is fixing the hardware that breaks. even though there's no value to the end user for it. They don't even understand why that would be of value to them. They may notice when it goes down, but they're not blaming the hard drive, they're blaming the IT department. And also to invest in solutions that do provide that continuous improvement, that improve over time, they get better and better, and new solutions roll out so that you can actually support a change management approach rather than worrying about redeploying, re-imaging every single time that something changes. And so when we look at Office 365 deployment, how do we get our customers that want to move away from that forklift approach into that operationalized approach? There are a couple of goals we have. And I'll call these goals because I won't call them things that we've delivered just yet. But again, we're on a continuous improvement path. And we are a one-year-old product around 21-year-olds in the Office division. So we're not quite the drooling baby, but we're not driving the car yet. But we really want to provide an easy path to Office 365 migration. We want to make sure that deployment is not treated as some sort of service that you go and procure from a consultant or something like that. But we think of deployment as a feature of the product. And just like Excel thinks of calculations as a feature of the product, we think deployment is a feature of Office 365. It's something that's ingrained there, and it's something built into it, and it's given the same rigor as any other end-user feature that we include in the products. And that means that we can support quick and easy deployments with very simple identity schemas. And we can also support much more complicated models of hybrid cloud, DirSync, synchronizing your Active Directory to provide a single sign-on experience, staging your migrations, helping with SharePoint migrations and other workloads to migrate across the cloud. We also think that moving mailboxes should be simple, should be our bread and butter. Turns out that mailboxes are pretty similar across all of the customers running Exchange. An Exchange mailbox is an Exchange mailbox, and so it's very easy for us to automate and programmatize that move. And we want to make sure that moving mailboxes is simple, whether you're going to the cloud or even if you're coming from the cloud back to an on-premises environment as well. We want to make sure that that is as simple as possible for you to do. We also want to make sure that we have a lot of partners that can build tools to accelerate this approach that can target very specific capabilities. The Exchange team can run a really, really fantastic Exchange environment. They don't know much about moving from group-wise environments. We have a lot of partners out there and a lot of knowledge in the industry that knows both group-wise and Exchange and can actually improve those tools perhaps better than Microsoft ever could as well. So we don't want to lock anyone out from building on this platform and helping customers move to or from the cloud in this approach. And we also believe that only extremely complex environments should require consulting services. We don't think that deployment is something that an IT team should have to pay for. I think it's something that should be a core competency. And we think that the real value add for consultants is building much more impressive solutions, helping you tackle the compliance, the archiving story, the storage capabilities, the legal governance and regulatory procedures that you're being asked to manage, how to embrace a strategy that is essentially tripling the amount of PCs that you manage. Once upon a time, perhaps you had a PC per person. Now, perhaps you have a PC and a phone per person. You could conceive in the future that you'll have a PC, a phone, and a tablet per person. And all of a sudden, without increasing headcount, you're tripling the amount of assets that IT has to manage. And so these are the sorts of things that we think are much higher value than just worrying about deployment. Deployment's a feature. It should be just something that you can turn on very quickly and manage yourself without having to rely on a lot of consulting services to do that kind of low-end work. So when you're moving to the cloud, and I guess this is something that I suppose should be obvious, but in retrospect, I see a lot of customers making this mistake. You can't just pick up a bad environment and move it to the cloud. A bad on-premises environment is a bad cloud environment with one difference. We have to manage it. And so we don't want to manage a bad environment. And so we do have a lot of gates and blocks to prevent you from bringing your baggage across into the cloud. So I'm going to ask you, as you're considering Office 365 and cloud solutions, that you leave your baggage at home. And I guess my analogy here is, if you're traveling, pack like a European, don't pack like an American. Bring the baggage that you need, understand what you need and what you want to move to the cloud. Just don't try and replicate the years, perhaps tens of years, perhaps 20, 30, 50 years of IT assets that you've had. Don't try and pull all of that complexity into the cloud. View the cloud as an opportunity for you to really simplify it down. You know, take the European approach to packing rather than the American approach. So let's talk about some of the technology considerations now. We'll cover a couple of these: Identity, Exchange, SharePoint, Lync, Office, and the tooling around it before we get into the process around this as well. And if you're all good and you're all listening by the end of this, I'll give out some prizes. We have 3 days of free consulting from Microsoft or any of our partners for many of you in the room. So if you can pay attention, I will help you with that at the end of the session. But in terms of identity, we really have 3 options for identity in Office 365. You can have no integration. You can treat Office 365 as a completely separate environment for your on-premises environment. And this is very easy to get started. Maybe it's a test environment. Maybe it's an environment for extranet users or partner access or vendor access or something like that that you don't want to intermingle with your own Active Directory environment in terms of identity. Maybe you want to have the directory and you want the same users to be managed from your Active Directory in Office 365. You'd like Office 365 to authenticate those users, but you want your Active Directory to populate and essentially manage those users. And that's our second option here. Then the third option is essentially you have directory federation. You have a single sign-on approach. So instead of trusting Office 365 to authenticate your users, instead we tell Office 365 to trust you to authenticate your users. And by doing that, you're in control of how you authorize your users to have access to Office 365. You can use Active Directory Federation services to do that. You can start to enforce all sort of hoops for your users to jump through, whether that's 2-factor authentication or 3-factor authentication, or you want to have a closed campus model where only people can get to your Office 365 tenant when they're in your building or on your domain or from a domain-managed machine. You can do all that with that Active Directory Federation services. And each of these has pros and cons. You know, there's no servers to set up when you're doing no integration, obviously. If you're doing directory only, you can manage all those users together, but you don't have single sign-on. You have a separate username and password. We don't believe that we need to synchronize your username and password to Office 365 for you to have a good experience. We think that that's a bad idea. We don't want to know what your passwords are for your own domain accounts. We don't want that information in our data center. We'd rather you keep that to yourself and just allow your users to log on. And that's really the third option here, is that we redirect any requests to get to that information to you. And you tell us, you give us a credential to say, all right, this user I trust or this user I don't, and we respect that. So you can think of step 1 and 2 as you trusting Office 365, and in step 3, Office 365 is trusting you. I don't want to go into too much detail about this because there's a great session tomorrow morning, 8:30 to 9:45, with Ross Adams, one of our online Active Directory gurus, to talk about Active Directory integration with Office 365. That's OSP 321 as well. So if you are interested in understanding all the identity models as well, this is definitely a great session for you to see. And if you can't get up early, it will be recorded as well. So that's a lot to consider about identity, and then we have a few tools to really automate that approach as well. The first we call the Deployment Readiness Tool. And I am sorry, but I will be throwing you acronyms all day. But DRT, the Deployment Readiness Tool, essentially what this is a little scanning tool that does a read-only scan of your environment. You run it from a domain-joined machine, and it does a series of LDAP queries to find out what your Active Directory topology looks like, what your user objects look like, the workstation information of your machines, object counts, network port analysis, DNS records. This is really important, and we found early on when we were doing some of these Office 365 deployments, we'd ask customers, how many objects in your Active Directory? And they'd say, well, we have about 3,000 people, so we probably have about 6,000 Active Directory objects. And we found with a 3,000-person organization, sometimes they can have hundreds of thousands of Active Directory objects. And when you set up a synchronization with Office 365, that many objects does pose quite a load limitation. We are limited by the laws of physics at how much how much information we can transfer into our data center. And usually it's not our pipes that are limited. Usually it's the pipes out of your network to get there. So you can run this tool. It's very easy to do. It'll run through and it'll give you a list of mail duplicates, your AD topology, and any things that you'll need to look at before you move to Office 365. Even if you're not planning on using Office 365, I think this is a great tool as well because it just tells you how close you are to a best practice environment in terms of how your Active Directory is structured and how many things Microsoft now views as not optimal. An example may be a period or a full stop before the @ symbol. So alistair.spears is okay, but alistair.spears@microsoft.com is not a valid address. Even though it's still fully supported by Active Directory, it's not something that we believe is best practice anymore, and there are a whole lot of issues and workarounds you need to apply when you have that sort of approach. So the DRT is the tool. You can get it from community.office365.com, our community site. It's a really powerful tool to run as well. So moving on to Exchange migration, a couple of things to think about here. We don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. There are many different Exchange environments out there, many different topologies, many different ways you may want to move users across into Office 365. So perhaps in order of complexity, there's the IMAP migration, where you take a single mail user and you just suck over the email into Office 365. We have a cutover Exchange migration, where essentially what you want to do is decommission your on-premises Exchange environment as fast as possible, over a weekend perhaps. So you're going to pull all the information across, redirect users, give them a blackout window, and all of a sudden you're back online the next day. We have a staged Exchange migration. When you have a really big environment or a really slow pipe, you want to actually stage those users, perhaps a couple of hundred every weekend until you're all done, perhaps over 6 months, perhaps over 12 months. And we also have a hybrid approach as well, when you want to leave some users online or on premises, and you want to move them back and forth. Essentially a drag and drop approach to send a mailbox back and forth between online and on premises as well. And so, the difference between the migration ones is you are really moving, your intent is to decommission Exchange on premises. The intent with a hybrid one is you can exist in that state for quite a long time as well, and you'll get the full capability of Exchange, both online and on premises, in that approach. I put in, for reference here, just a little chart that you can see. We support some of these environments from some versions of Exchange, and we also support IMAP migration from any IMAP service. But if you're coming from Lotus Notes or GroupWise, if you're decommissioning those environments, we would probably recommend some partner tools that I'll go through a little bit later as well. So let me now jump across and show you essentially how this approach will look. Okay, so just a quick show of hands. Who's seen this tool before, the Exchange Remote Connectivity? A few people. That's great. Yeah. What does this tool tell you to do? It tells you whether your Exchange environment is properly configured or not. Very important tool. Really powerful tool. You'll have seen that we've also added in an Office 365 tab as well, so you can start to analyze your connectivity to Office 365 as well. But the reason I'm showing you this tool is that to do these migrations, you really need Outlook Anywhere set up. You need RPC over HTTP turned on. So if you don't have that set up, if your Exchange environment is only internal and you don't have Outlook Anywhere, you don't have OA available, we won't be able to do a cutover migration from your environment as well. So again, Outlook Anywhere, run this test. Use a dummy Exchange account. Do not use a real Exchange account when you're doing this. For security reasons, it's not that it won't work, but we don't recommend. Best practice is for you to type in domain passwords on any website, even if it's a Microsoft website. So we'd recommend that you set up a dummy account to test a lot of this stuff. You don't want to impact any real mailboxes that you have on your system when you do this. So once we have that environment, and we have it all set up, and there are a few other things that we need to set up on premises as well. But we'll log into session timed out. we're logging into the Office 365 administration portal. And a quick show of hands, who's seen this before? A few people as well, fantastic. And so in this environment, this is where we'll actually handle the cutover Exchange migration by going into the Exchange management console here, the Exchange management console for Office 365. Just something that you may have noticed if you've been playing around with Office 365 is we do jump around between domains. We're actually now on Outlook.com rather than MicrosoftOnline.com. We actually have a federated model for how we handle Office 365. Even though it is the one service, the Exchange team runs Exchange independently of the SharePoint team, which means that we can patch Exchange as fast as we need to, while the SharePoint team can patch SharePoint as fast as they need to, and it doesn't interfere with the running of the system as well. So it is essentially a loosely coupled system with shared attributes around identity and the administration console that pulls it all together. But here we are, we've passed through into the Exchange environment here. And what we can now do is see some of our mailboxes. And opening up these mailboxes here, I can see some of the capabilities of that mailbox, see how they're being used. And I'll go across to email migration. And I will start an email migration process. And this is the area where we can either migrate from IMAP or 2007 or 2003 here as well. So I'll actually go through this wizard. We'll enter in our Exchange administrator account. We'll enter in our server name. And we'll tell Exchange Online how many mailboxes to try and migrate at a time. And then Exchange Online will just start sucking out that email from your Exchange server and putting it into Exchange Online. Once it's done, you can change your MX records and you're in the cloud. That's it. Turn off the Exchange server on premises, go home, and then you can call Microsoft every time that something goes wrong with your email and sleep well at night. So that's as simple as it can be. For more complicated environments, we'd really recommend the hybrid approach. And so that's generally the approach we do. But for those users just looking to migrate a few hundred users, get them into Office 365, reuse that Exchange server for something else, you can do that really easily in this approach as well. So a couple of things to think about then when we look at a hybrid approach. In a hybrid approach, it really is an online move. So the mailbox never goes offline when you're using a hybrid approach. Essentially what Exchange can do is it's smart enough to realize that I'm talking to Exchange Online, and I like to think of it as the Exchange Online service just becomes an extension of your farm. It just becomes, conceptually at least, another DAG for you to manage, for you to push users to in that approach as well. So the user stays connected throughout this approach. What's more, not only does the user stay connected, they don't need to resync their OST file, which is a really important thing for me. I have a 12 gigabyte OST file. I don't want to move, I don't want to download another 12 gig into my OST file in Outlook every time I migrate. So if you are dealing with really big mailboxes, this is another great feature of hybrid, is that it just keeps the context of that mailbox and that user as well. The moves are queued up. So you can say from the Exchange Management Console, I want to move these mailboxes. I will start moving them whenever we have capacity. So that essentially the data center, you've given them an instruction and an order, and then we'll start migrating when we're ready at the most efficient time to do that as well. So it is really paced out as you move that mailbox approach. And importantly, you can then pull it back as well. You can just pull it back into your Exchange on-premises environment really simply using the same approach as well. So you don't have to go through a very complicated migration back if you want to get off Office 365. You can just drag it back from the tools you're familiar with running Exchange as well. So you'll still have Exchange servers on premises. You'll still have Active Directory federation to get this model to work. But you can be managing less servers. You can start to think about what class of users do I have, and do they need to be on an expensive on-premises mailbox, or can I get some economies of scale by perhaps using my kiosk workers or my retail workers or my shift workers onto Exchange Online and still manage them as part of that process? And perhaps one of my retail workers or one of my bank tellers gets promoted again and joins the head office or something like that, or is dealing with some sensitive information that I think that I need to manage in on-premises, I can just move them across as well, or vice versa. If my CFO is not really performing and we want to get him to work in front of the shop floor, we can move him into Office 365 as well and take away his on-premises rights. But that never happens. So, it's very seamless, this approach, and it's a fantastic solution. It's taken us many years to get to the point of this in Exchange, but it's such a nice solution now that it's so easy to do, and we've got a lot of really powerful tools to help you do this. So let me bring up just a couple of these tools now as well. This is the Exchange Server Deployment Assistant. Show of hands if you've seen this before. A couple of people as well. Yeah, this is a really powerful tool, and it gives you such a step-by-step guidance of how to do that problem.
Lost your Wi-Fi.
Have I lost? Oh, I bumped the cable. I turned Wi-Fi off because I know you're all twittering away on your PCs and laptops. But I bumped the cable. So essentially what this tool will do, it'll ask you a series of questions. What would you like your hybrid environment to look like? What color are your servers? All that sort of thing. And then it will give you some step-by-step guidance of how to move and how to set up that hybrid experience as well. So a really powerful way to move through that environment. So essentially, I can be coming from Exchange Server 2010. Yes, I only want to use Exchange Online for archiving. I don't want to use it for my primary mailboxes. Then it'll pass me the appropriate guidance for that particular configuration as well. If I jump back, I'll say no there. Do you want all users to use their on-premises credentials? Of course. Do you want to route inbound mail for both your on-premises and Exchange Online mailboxes through your on-premises organization? No. I'll let Office 365 take all the spam. Thank you very much. I can essentially go through here. I can get the answers. And what it'll actually generate for me here is a checklist. And a checklist of features I can pull out as a CSV. And I can go here now. And step by step, I have a customized approach of how I need to set up Office 365, configure my on-premises Exchange 2010 environment, and connect the two together as well. So it's a really powerful way of just getting that set up the right way with the right guidance. I'm sure you're all aware there's a bundle of Exchange settings that you can apply, but I like this because it's step by step. It's like karaoke. You just follow the bouncing ball, and you'll get a great online experience configured. So that's the Exchange Deployment Assistant. Essentially, it will generate maps like this once you've gone through all those steps as well. That will tell you how complicated your environment needs to look like, and then a step-by-step guidance of how to draw on those red lines by applying the right settings in Exchange. So if you're coming from other mail platforms or you have a fairly complicated Exchange environment, we'll generally recommend that you use some third-party tools to do that are much better at migrating. Quest has been around for quite a long time, helping decommission the last of the notes servers that's out there. And so Quest has a great notes migrator, a great group-wise migrator. Binary Tree as well has a great migration tool. Migration Wiz does a lot with migrating to Exchange Online. So all of these tools, they do have a cost. Actually, many of our Microsoft consultants use these tools when they come across these sorts of environments as well. So we're not, we don't have a not invented here syndrome. If we see a great tool that's best practice and that people have much more knowledge of how to migrate from tools like GroupWise and Notes, we'll actually use these tools instead of building our own if they're good enough. So these are ones that I'd really recommend if you're coming from any of those other platforms. This is another tool that is really handy. It's made by one of our MVPs. I like this tool because it's a lot easier to remember than DRT. It's just testmyoffice365.com. And I'll show you how this tool works. It really just helps you make sure that you've got all of the settings in your DNS set up appropriately. So I can essentially type in a domain name of one of our valued customers, Contoso Corp, and I'll check their Exchange records, their link records. I'll make sure I'm not a robot. and I'll perform the test. Oh. I said it was a third-party tool, right? No. It probably just timed out again. Sorry, I was planning way too much in advance. But at least you know it's using ASP. Okay. It's a great tool. Check it out. It's not working right now. But essentially, it'll just give you, little traffic lights to say, is your environment good? Do you have the right MX records set up to be pointing to Office 365? Will you get mail flow? Do you have your SIP addresses for link pointing into the right places as well? So it's just a really handy tool to check a lot of that information. And there's an awesome screenshot. So Link Online. Our view on Link Online is that really there's nothing to migrate. Link Online archives everything into your inbox. And so as long as you're migrating your Exchange inbox, Link will be fine. You don't need to migrate anything. You can just start again with a new Link server and a new Link address. You change over the DNS records, and Link will be fine. That's the Microsoft view. You could make a case that actually Link does have some stuff that I'd like to migrate. I'd like to migrate how my users have set up their contact lists. I'd like to be able to automate that contact list setting up. I'd like to make sure that everyone in the HR department has the HR contact list set up, and I'd like to enforce some consistency across Link as I'm moving to Link Online. And so there's a tool for that. It costs a grand total of $10 US. It's also made by an MVP. And essentially, it's just a nice little tool that hides a lot of the PowerShell scripts for you to make templates and provision contacts and migrate contacts from Link on premises to Link Online. So again, this is a tool that I'd recommend. Xstrand.com. You can see the links in the PowerPoint slides. It'll be up on the website after this session. But it's just a really handy tool as well if you do have that requirement around migrating Link. But Link is a very simple tool to migrate. Office. So Office comes with Office 365 as well. It's the Office in 365. And so getting Office through Office 365 does have a couple of changes as well to consider. Firstly, even though it is good old Office, your users won't notice any difference. There's a couple of nice little gotchas snuck in there as well. First is that Office 365 is a user subscription. In many ways, it's like a CAL. You license per user. Office is like Windows. It licensed per device. Office in Office 365 is licensed per user. Up to 5 machines can be installed with Office at any one time for the same user through Office 365. So it's a very different licensing model. It's a very different activation model. You don't use KMS or you don't use Mac to activate Office from Office 365. It activates against the Office 365 service. It essentially pops up a dialog box to say, hey, what's your Office 365 login details? And you'll log in with your user account. And this is great for a number of reasons. It means that for users at home, you can allow them to download the Office client and install on their home PC. They can authenticate with the same licenses. You don't have to manage the software as tightly anymore because you can just manage the identity of the user, and you can choose whether they have access to deploy that software or not. And you can do all the same stuff you used to do about packaging up Office through System Center or through MDT or baking it into the image. So you can still treat it the same in every way, but it'll just allow the users to activate it with their account. If they leave the organization or if a laptop gets stolen, the Office software will actually just time out after 30 days, or you can disable the user directly through the administration portal. You can revoke their rights, and Office will go into a reduced functionality mode as well. So you have a couple of new capabilities to manage with Office from Office 365, but by all intents and purposes, from the user's perspective, it's still Excel, it's still Word, it's the same Excel, the same Word, the same PowerPoint, the same Office, and it's actually Office Professional Plus, the everything version. But it does raise another interesting point, is that your desktop does need to be kept up to date. We'll do the work of keeping Office 365 up to date. We'll apply every patch. We'll make sure that environment's secure. We'll make sure the service updates go onto the service. We'll even upgrade that service between versions. And we don't refer to Office 365. We actually think of it as versionless. We don't say Exchange 2010 Online. We say Exchange Online. Because we're well past Exchange 2010 Online now. We've added so many features that we haven't rolled up into the next on-premises release. But Office 365 is very much versionless. And so you can expect when we release the next version of our products, and we'll be previewing them very soon, later this summer, you can expect as an Office 365 customer that you'll just get that. That's our responsibility to upgrade you now. You don't have to do that forklift anymore because you're onto an evergreen platform. But that means that you should also think about your desktop, because even though every Exchange version doesn't require the latest version of Outlook talking to it, we do start to deprecate some of the older platforms as we go forward as well. So you should expect to keep your desktop environment a little bit closer to being up to date, as well as Internet Explorer, and as well as certain patches as well, to make sure you have an optimal experience. So let's talk about SharePoint Online now. And I'd like to invite up Jeremy Thake, who's the chief architect from one of our valued partners, AvePoint, to talk about their solution for migrating SharePoint Online. It can be a pretty complex beast. You can do a lot of pretty powerful customizations to it. So it's not as simple as migrating Exchange, which is essentially just a mailbox across into Exchange Online. So thanks very much, Jeremy.
Thanks, Alistair.
Take it away.
Thanks for your time, guys. So I'm from a company called AvePoint. So we've focused on SharePoint since 2001, so from Tahoe to today. We've been focusing on the migration space for a long time, and obviously there are some gaps in that space from the story of moving from an on-premise SharePoint environment to the cloud. So if I can just change the next slide. So essentially with our product, we have the ability to migrate from an on-premise environment. The way that we work is we have a manager that you install on the server, and we drop agents onto each SharePoint farm that you require to do any kind of connection to our DocAv platform. And then we talk directly to the client APIs that are available in SharePoint Online with Office 365. We can do it at a very granular level, which I'll show in the demonstration. So we can take an entire site collection or web application, but we can also go all the way down to an individual list item if you choose, and have various different filter policies in there. And then we can also move some of the custom metadata and the taxonomy information that's stored in service applications, which are outside of the scope of the site collections that you kind of deal with within the Office 365 administration. And from a hybrid workload, we also, as I demonstrated in the keynote on Tuesday morning, was this concept of replicating content between an on-premise and a SharePoint inline environment. So where you might have a particular workload that you want to share with more external users in SharePoint Online, we can then replicate that back into your on-premise environment. So we're seeing a lot of customers adopting Office 365 from an extranet scenario first off, and then maybe moving other workloads up as they choose. But we can also move workloads off back onto on-premise too. So we have a lot of customers that may keep the content online for a period of 2 years, but then from an archive perspective, rather than just remove it from SharePoint, we actually can just move it back onto an on-premise archiving SharePoint file. And essentially, we also know that some customers, and this goes back to that bad practice perspective, have very large content databases sitting in their on-premise SharePoint farms. So we have the ability to take one giant site collection that might be 400 gig, and we can start to restructure those into multiple site collections, and obviously do that on the fly as we move up to SharePoint Online. So I wanted to just quickly show you the interface that we have on the screen. So, okay, so basically we had a user interface that runs within a normal internet browser because it's a web application that runs on the server. And essentially the benefit with the DocAv platform is we have all of our products within one suite. So today we're just going to demonstrate the migration product, but we also have the concept of other capabilities. And if you want to hear more, please come and see us at our booth. So in Content Manager, the key here is that we don't just see the SharePoint farms that are on-premise, we also see all the SharePoint farms we have in the cloud. So when I have a look at managing those things, you'll see here that I have my Thake, which is my personal SharePoint Online environment, where I can actually come in here and actually edit those details and actually manage what site collections we can see available within our interface. So in this instance, I only have one site collection in that SharePoint environment, but we can map multiple site collections, because you have to remember, with Office 365, you only have control up to the site collection level. Whereas on an on-premise farm, you can manage each individual web application. So essentially, we can create what we call plans, and I'll just show you that, where I can drive down in the tree all the way down to maybe just moving an individual document library from one site over to another. And we can drive through that site collection on the right-hand side, which is essentially talking directly up to the SharePoint Online instance in Office 365. and then grab those things and move that data directly into the tree where we require it online. So you can see here there's a bit of lag with the internet, but essentially we could move all that information to a shared documents library, and at which point when we jump to the copy, that will then give me the ability to do some flexible things like filtering. So maybe we only move documents that are less than 1 year old and leave some of the other data on premise. So hopefully that's give you a good overview. If you'd like to see more, please come and see us in the booth with a big pyramid booth with the quad bike in the corner. And thanks very much for your time there. And thanks, Alistair, for
Thanks,
that.
Jeremy. Yeah. No, it's a fantastic solution, and I just love the granularity that you can get with this solution. Just by taking individual sites or individual types of sites. And too often we've seen users that just need to try something and essentially fail fast. If you want to try a particular SharePoint site, or you want to try a blog or a wiki or something like that, but you don't have the space on-prem to do it, it's so easy to just set up an Office 365 site, share that around and start the work. But if it does go viral, tools like this can help you get it under control and help you get that business case to buy that extra server and then pull it back from Office 365 onto on-prem and keep all the permissions lined up and those sorts of things as well. So change tack now and talk a little bit about process. A lot of technology, a lot of different tools there to help you migrate through that approach. But if you don't have the process down right, it's kind of null and void. And this is a quote from Uncle Bill that was a really good, I think, analogy of the sorts of challenges that we have with deployment. And the first rule of technology is that any automation applied to an efficient operation will improve the efficiency. And any automation applied to an inefficient process will magnify the inefficiency. And so we really focused on making sure the process is as efficient as possible, because then the next step for us is to really automate those steps and take a lot of those tools that you've seen that, to be honest, do exist in silos to help you move Exchange or SharePoint or Link, but help put them together into an end-to-end process that's much easier to automate and to move wholeheartedly. I can see some cameras going off. So, and I'll hit you with a couple of terms. What I really want to do here is give you some of the kind of the sausage making that goes on and how we think about whether you're a right fit for Office 365 and whether Office 365 is the right fit for you. So bear with me as I get through some of these technical terms. But you can expect from a team like the Office division that invented Excel, we like our numbers, we like our calculations. And so it should be no surprise that for Office 365, we've been able to dumb it down to a number of what that risk assessment is. So we take two numbers and two different approaches. The first, we call the Solution Alignment Index. And what this is really assessing is how close are your business needs and your technical capabilities to what Office 365 provides. Is it a good fit? Is the solution a good fit? And we'll rate that. And that's one of the, essentially, the variables that go into our risk index. The second one is the Migration Risk Index. Even if you're totally aligned, Office 365 is exactly what you want, but you're living in this topsy-turvy, weird world of Office and Exchange and Link on-prem in a very unique and optimized for your particular business, perhaps at a certain time, environment, we want to assess that as well. So you essentially think of it as how close to Office 365 is what I want, and then how good is my environment to move into it. It's back to that garbage in, garbage out approach that we really want to make sure that not only is the solution a good fit, but your environment is in the right state to move across to Office 365. So we take those two objectives and we kind of combine them. Essentially we measure this from not aligned, evaluating, remediating, fully aligned, high risk, medium risk, low risk. And we generate one more build. Sorry. We also make PowerPoint and lovely animations. The Office Alignment Index. So the Office 365 Alignment Index is essentially an aggregation of those two numbers that tells us how good is your environment. And so we can take this approach, and essentially this is a series of questions. It represents everything we've learned from Office 365, as well as BPOS, the environment before Office 365, as well as MMS, or Microsoft Managed Services, which is the environment before BPOS, really the start. And we create this number, and it's a series of questions and checks that we like to perform. We use it today. Our partners use it today. We're automating this approach so it'll be easier for you to use yourselves as well. But really the driver from this is to make sure customer satisfaction is higher. There are no bad deployments. We would rather settle for no deployment than a bad deployment in this approach. We know that Office 365 is new and the cloud is a new idea, and it's not for everyone yet. And we also know that we have pretty good products in Exchange on-premises and SharePoint on-premises. And if you don't need to go to Office 365 and you're happy with the environment today, why would we upset that? Why would we make work for you? We just don't want to do it because when it's in Office 365, if it's work for you, it's also work for us. And so we want to avoid work. So it's maintained. We give quarterly updates to these as we learn new things, and as we improve the service, we update this alignment index calculator. And essentially what happens at the end of this is we generate a series of reports, a solution alignment report, a migration risk report. We export that data. We actually upload that data to Microsoft. We ask our partners in our Microsoft field to send that data back to us anonymously. Because what happens with that data is that it actually goes into our monthly triage of features. And you can see here some examples. I've grayed out some of the issues, but this is January. This is some of the issues in January. You can see here that we look at every single issue and what customers are having problems with, what the most common environments are, and where we need to fix. And so this is how we prioritize a lot of our features around deployment. And this is why we have the Exchange hybrid deployment wizard, a lot of improvements in Service Pack 2 for Exchange on-premises, ADFS, UPN, IP block changes. We're introducing the ability to filter DIR-sync so you don't have to synchronize your entire Active Directory up to Office 365. You can filter it down to certain OUs. But this feedback that we get daily as people run this tool, and we roll it up into these reports, and we look at these reports over time to help guide these features going forward. So it's a really powerful approach as how we do it. And so essentially, that is one of the gates, and we have a gated approach. Even if you tell us that you want Office 365, we'll give you 3 chances to not go to Office 365. We conduct a technical briefing, and that's the "Are you sure?" We do the solution alignment workshop, which is generally a 1-day or 2-day workshop. We say, "Are you really sure?" And then we do the migration due diligence workshop. We say, "Are you really, really sure you want to go to Office 365? Are you ready to come on this journey with us?" And only then do we do the migration, or we start the migration. So that's essentially our process. You can imagine it's not a very scalable process right now. It's a fairly small process that we go through. But that's fine. We're okay with that because we want to make sure it's the right process before we start to automate this process, before we start to open the floodgates on cloud migration. And so to do this, it's very labor intensive. You can imagine you need a consultant to help you through this approach. And so we will pay for the consultant for you. Through software assurance benefits, we have a 3-day offering that Microsoft or Microsoft partners will come out and help you run through this approach. And so I'll take you through that now. We call this the Office 365 proof of concept. It's not exactly like a proof of concept. I mean, a proof of concept in Office 365 terms is slightly different. But essentially what we'll do is we'll help you assess Office 365, we'll help you set up an Office 365 environment the right way, and then we'll conduct a technical briefing to make sure you're educated. We'll understand your environment to make sure that it's the right sort of environment to go to Office 365, and we'll conduct the migration due diligence work to make sure that you can move across to this, and we'll give you all of this information. So it's part of your software assurance benefits. It goes through these steps. And generally, it's a 3-day engagement as well. So the technical briefing, we explain the situation. I'll burn through these. Oh, too fast. We also actually give you an extended trial. Anyone can sign up for Office 365 trials on the website, office365.com. 30 days for free, up to 25 users. In this approach, we actually give you a 90-day approach, we think, for enterprises that are really seriously evaluating Office 365. 30 days may not be long enough, so we'll give you a 90-day proof of concept with 50 licenses, so you can really kick the tires on it heavily, in addition to going through a lot of the assessment work as well in this approach. and then doing the migration due diligence work, giving you the risk index, giving you those reports to really analyze, to make sure that you either have a business case to take to your management to say we think this is a good idea, or you have a list of reasons at why you think this is a bad idea. Because every time cloud is mentioned, execs seem to lose their heads and make all sorts of funny decisions. So we want to make sure that you can have a rational conversation based in reality, based with experience through this approach as well. So again, 3 days, software assurance benefit, either Microsoft directly or through one of Microsoft's partners can run through this approach for you. And as a software assurance benefit customer, it's of no cost. So I'll quickly go through the run state and let you get out and have a beer a little bit earlier. But really, what happens when I'm on the service is kind of a key concern. We talked a lot about deployment and how to get there and how to move. And some people think that when I make this move, then there's nothing for IT to do anymore. And that's couldn't be further from the truth. It's still Exchange. Yes, it's true that you don't have to swap out hard drives every time a hard drive breaks, but you still have to manage Exchange. And most of us are run off our feet trying to manage the tripling of devices that we're having to manage inside of our IT environment. So there's always plenty of work to do, but you still do need to manage the service, and we have a number of tools to help you to do that. The first, and perhaps the most important, is the Service Health Dashboard. This is the tool that, as an Office 365 administrator, you'll live and die here every day. It's, I used to wish I had this on premises, that I could see all of the different services that I had to manage live and how they're going over time. I can click into any of these numbers. You can see there's some information marks with certain things happening, and I can click into there and see anything, any alerts, any planned maintenance, any issues that have been reported in the service, and it all gets rolled up to me here as well. It also has an RSS feed. An RSS feed is great because you don't have to manage that website every day. You can see that information come through. Yes, it's hosted on a separate server to Office 365, so if Office 365 goes down, the Service Health Dashboard keeps running. It's a very highly available service. You need these health dashboards to be that way. But it's a great tool for you to look at that information and manage that information as well. And it's important to realize that Office 365 is evergreen. And so as we move to this operational model rather than a capital model, the security patches, the updates, the upgrades are taken care of for us, as well as new features coming out will be turned on in the service for you to then control whether you enable them for your users as well. So just an example, as I said, we're a year old. There are a number of different features. And we started not quite feature parity with Exchange on premises. But over the last year, month to month, we've chipped away at this, and we've added a lot more capabilities. We've even added some new features that aren't even available in Exchange on premises yet. My favorite is the ability in Outlook Web App now to get a full Office Web App rendering of any of your attachments. So you can see your PowerPoint slides in native PowerPoint. We're not using the Stellent rendering engine anymore, except for PDF. We're using the Excel rendering engine and the Word rendering engine and the PowerPoint rendering engine to render those rich documents that you can share around with attachments. So it's a great use of your 25 gig mailbox. You can see it there. You can browse through. And you can see all the transitions apply. We rolled that out in January. We also updated sender photos in OA. So this is a feature that you can get in Outlook Client, but not yet available in Outlook Web Apps on-prem. But we were able to roll that out online already as well. And you can see the pictures come through. You can change your picture through the OA view, which will update in the SharePoint view as well. And so you can manage this experience here very easily as well. We also introduced, with the introduction of Internet Explorer 9, we introduced an Internet Explorer 9 app mode for Outlook. So you can, for Outlook Web Apps, sorry. So you can essentially bind OA to your taskbar, and you can get a jump list. You get notifications when new mail arrives. You can see unread mail. You can see all the windows grouped together. You even get a quick launch bar. So it's it really does start to blur the lines between what Outlook is and what a web app does, but it's a really powerful way to use OA, especially in a lightweight version as well, or if you manage multiple Exchange environments, it's a great way to have that view as well. And in the case of SharePoint now, we can invite external users and partners or extranet users into our SharePoint environment. We can turn essentially any SharePoint Online site into an extranet as the administrator. We don't necessarily give that right to the user, but as an administrator, you can say, oh, this site's now an extranet. Let my users invite their business partners to collaborate in this site automatically. And this is a fairly complicated thing to set up in SharePoint. It involves talking to your network guys. And if your network guys are anything like my old network guys, they weren't the best people to talk to. But it really does involve you to set up this environment really easily. You can start to share out people. You can manage those users. But you can also delegate that so your users can manage their own external partners to collaborate on just by signing up for an easy ID, essentially, which is a live ID under the covers, but would be logging in with their own Microsoft.com address if they were from Microsoft or whatever else it would be. And as we've heard from service updates, in particular customers that moved from BPOS to Office 365, which was not a service update, it was a service transition. We really made that move from a hosted cloud model to a real pure cloud model in Office 365. But the feedback we received was that the next service update should have no required IT action. It should happen automatically without me knowing if I don't want to. All the services should be updated in the background. My users shouldn't be impacted. There should be minimal desktop remediation required if I'm up to date with my desktop. My users shouldn't be disrupted. Email should still flow. There should be no interruption to email. Only the web apps should show the instant updates. I want to be able to pilot the update. I want to do the update on my terms. I want to enable some of these new capabilities, upgrade SharePoint sites on my own terms, change the UI on my own terms. So this is some of the feedback we heard from the service updates. And these are the things that you can expect us to be working on as we make the transition between the next major update sometime soon as well. And so that brings me to the end of the session. I hope it was interesting. Really, the kind of go-tos I have for you is to investigate Office 365. Even if you're not going to use it, it's a fantastic tool for training. It's a fantastic tool for demoing. It's a fantastic tool for just getting up and running and testing something out and playing around with it. And there are a whole lot of tools to help you with that. It's important to have a clean on-premises environment. It's the end of spring. You can still get some spring cleaning in. We have a number of tools for Office 365 as well that can help you do that cleanup so you have a really crisp environment if you do decide to move to Office 365 later on. I would really recommend you to conduct an Office 365 proof of concept. This is the right approach to get an expert in to talk to you about this environment, to run through it. We also like it because it helps us get the right quantitative feedback for us to improve the product, which is why we're willing to pay for it. But really conduct these Office 365 POCs. Either talk to your Microsoft representative or your Microsoft partner about running these tools as well. I'd love to see the data come back from you guys. It's anonymous, but the data really does make a difference in how we go with the services. So thank you very much. I'll end there and open it up to questions. Please submit your evaluations. They don't fly me back unless I get a certain amount of evaluations. But thank you very much for your time, and thanks for listening. Cheers.